Mauri ore te whānau and welcome back to Planting Seeds. Before we get into this next episode, I want to do a bit of a trigger warning for what is to come, because me and the bro waste no time getting into it and we talk about some sensitive topics, but there are his lived experiences such as sexual abuse, family violence and things of that nature. So just a heads up for what it is that you're about to listen to or what it is that you're about to watch in this episode. And also, I want to do a big shout out to the official sponsors of the Planting Seeds podcast, which is Clothing. They've got some amazing things coming out in their summer drop. So if you want to support the podcast, please use capitals Planting Seeds at the checkout when you shop with Clothing. Let's get into it. This is a beautiful, heartwarming episode with the brother Matt Brown. Let's go. E te whānau, no mai hoki mai to Planting Seeds. We've got an awesome guest here with us too. She has kōrero to share his kaupapa. I was just at one of his events this evening and just completely inspired by his story, by the heart that he has, by the nature of his mahi and the contribution that serves his purpose. And what I feel is just this wave and this rush of the work that is happening within our communities, within this kaupapa, with what I am doing. It's deeply felt and it's deeply needed. And so would like to introduce Matt Brown. No mai, bro.
Talofa, brother. Tēnā koutou. Honoured to be here, bro.
Bro, been waiting to have this session with you, and we've had brief interactions in the past, but cool that you're here in Whakatāne. Big shout out to the sister Trina for setting up the event this evening, and it was just so cool to be there, bro. It's just so cool to see the mahi that you have been doing, but to actually feel into it and to, I guess, see into it based on you sharing your story and your wife Sarah sharing her story. There's just something powerful within what you guys are doing, within your guys' own unique approach to things, and just the strength and vulnerability. So just wanted to mihi to you and your wife and the kaupapa this evening. So, man.
Thanks, also.
My bro, a powerful story to share, and I know a big part of it is vulnerability, and I know you don't mind going straight there, and I'm keen to go straight there. And vulnerability does take mahi, it does take a bit of courage, but something that Whaia Brené Brown says is that you can't have vulnerability without courage. And where did you first feel into it?
I suppose I got vulnerable at 15, sharing my story. In high school when you have to do your speeches in English, your 3-minute speeches, I decided to talk about family violence. That was my 3-minute speech, and honestly, my poor teachers didn't know what to do. And all my boys at school were like, bro, why are you talking about this stuff? We don't talk about this stuff. This shit happens in our homes, but we don't talk about this stuff. You're bringing shame to your family. But I had to, because the only other option was suicide. Was taking my life. And that was a friend that just consistently hung around on my shoulder, whispering in my ear that I wasn't good enough, I was unworthy. It was a very possible idea.
Wow.
And so, I spoke up at 15 of my story of experiencing, living in family violence, alcohol abuse, that's all I ever saw. And then also being sexually abused from a young age. It was all around me.
Wow. And do you feel having that kind of upbringing and violence is very normal? What does that do, bro? What kind of environment is that where violence is just normal?
That's what it was. It was normal. Hostile, unsafe. Home was a volatile war zone. I didn't know any different. And so, of course, this is going to manifest out into the public and in school. And, you see your siblings beat up teachers and beat up, other people in school. Like, it was just all around me. What was happening at home, what happened in school and in the public that people got to witness was only a fragment of what was happening at home. So we didn't know anything better.
It's quite a... you just never know what's happening behind closed doors, eh?
Even now when I speak and share my story, like friends from school and, friends of my brothers, they all just like shocked, like, can't believe it. You boys were so happy and, you guys were always laughing and giggling. We did not know that you guys were experiencing the abuse that you guys were going through.
Far out. And so what was that like for you and your brothers? Did that make you guys closer? Or because if you're seeing violence as your normal, was there any love, or how did you guys see love at that time?
Of course we seen love, but for us, love looked like survival.
Wow.
And so witnessing my mother get the shit beaten out of her from as long as I can remember, from the day I was born. Her love really rescued us, but then her love also for our father caused a lot of our trauma, a lot of our, the things that we experience as children, that children should never hear, listen or experience, came down to my mum's choices.
Wow.
She didn't see any other option. Leaving him was not a possibility. She didn't believe that she could survive or live life without him. And so she sacrificed her sovereignty, her dignity, to be with a man who always abused her or lashed out in violence because he didn't know how to regulate himself.
Wow. And you sharing your story, did that open up, I guess, the permission for others to be like, whoa, bro, that happens to me too?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a massive believer. When you're vulnerable, you give permission for other people to be vulnerable. And so, I've been a barber now for over a decade, 15 years. And I've always shared my story openly with the men who visit our barber shop, the men that sit in my chair. And when I share my story of family violence, sexual abuse, honestly, so many men just open up. Some men cry. Some men don't come and see me for a while, oh, this was a heavy haircut, but they eventually come back and we just carry on where we left off.
Wow.
And it's beautiful, bro. Like, you just never know who is struggling silently. And so many of our tani are struggling silently right now.
I think that comes down to like something that you were saying too, is around that regulating the emotions. And if we don't, I guess, better understand our emotions, that they're there to be felt, but they're not there to latch onto. They're not there to consume us, eh? And when we think about regulating emotions, where do you even start, bro? Because one, for me, certainly there were times where I was on this roller coaster of emotions where I'd feel super upset, and then out of nowhere I'm like emotional, and then I feel like I'm okay, and then boom, I'm hit with anger. And this was when I was going through like relationship challenges, a few years back, but I had no idea about what was going on until I started to learn about myself. And so to regulate emotions, where would someone start, or where would some of the brothers first start their process?
In the breath. I'm a massive believer in breath work. We need to feel to heal. And so there's no way getting away from our feelings. They're always going to be there. But we've cultivated a culture and society where any sign of any form of discomfort, we run, we hide, or we numb. Avoid, and you see it a lot, especially with the men that I grew up around. We just numbed it, substance abuse, avoidance, so a lot of passive aggressiveness, exchange of colourful words. And so I always encourage people to breathe, breath work, walk away, that it's all right to walk away. And in fact, you add to your mana if you can breathe and walk away. There's no trampling on your mana, there's no stealing or taking from your mana if you can walk away. So, Yeah.
It's a powerful way. I've been learning from a mentor of mine by the name of Brad Rapira. He's an amazing tāne, super philosophical, but he's got a very, very huge experience within helping others and self-regulating, and he's been teaching me more about the breath as well. And you're saying that when we're breathing into our diaphragm, it's pushing the tension of our organs, which is creating a signal to our brain that we're not under stress, we're not under threat. Because when we're in a space of stress, that's pumping heaps of cortisol and adrenaline into our system. That's putting us into fight or flight. Now, back in the days, our fight or flight was when there was a threat, when our lives were in danger. Whereas now, when we think about certain things, or we're out of balance in certain ways and we get triggered, that's creating the same sort of signal in our body that if our life was under threat. And so to self-regulate, as you were saying, is to breathe through our nose into our diaphragm, so it creates a different signal to our brain, which helps us to respond rather than to react.
That's good, bro.
But bro, like, I've literally just picked this up probably over the last month or so, as I've been getting some one-on-one mentoring with him, because as you know, if you're in a space of service and you're creating space for other people and you're encouraging vulnerability and encouraging growth, you have to be undertaking that kind of process as well. And so I'm very much so aware of that. And so I'm always seeking and looking and involving myself in different spaces to where I can receive. And so me being a part of, I guess, getting guidance from someone has been so transformational for me, and learning things like this has just given me so much more to be able to articulate and to be able to provide more understanding to these things that we don't yet know.
And that's it there too. Like, it's so important to ask for help, you know, because majority of people want to help. Like, most people want to help. And so for a lot of us men, we suppress our thoughts, our feelings down, thinking that we're making ourselves believe that we're the only ones going through this, but we're not. You know, you're not alone. So many other men are feeling the same way. And in fact, I mean, I'm lucky, you know, as a barber, I get to talk to men every day. And so if I want advice about a healthy relationship, I'm going to talk to men who are in healthy relationships, you know. And it's the same thing. Like, if you want to learn how to regulate yourself, or, you know, what it means to do the work, or what does doing the work look like, talk to people who are doing the work.
It's so important, bro. Like, that's it right there. Being able to ask for help, and that takes, again, it's another level of vulnerability, because you have to let go of the ego. You know, the ego can't survive if it doesn't yet know everything, eh? And so you have to leave that at the door and be able to ask those questions. And for you to be able to get in the practice in with what it is that you do, did it naturally come for you, bro, from that age of 15? Then what actually got you into barbering, and how did all that happen?
Man, so I got into barbering, obviously because of hip-hop. You know, I grew up in Christchurch, Otutahi, where not many people look like me, talk like me, or dress like us, you know. In fact, you know, the further south you go in this country, in Aotearoa, the further white it is. Yeah. And so my superheroes growing up were, you know, the All Blacks, because they look like us. And so I grew up in the era of Michael Jones and John Olomu, Ronnie Clark. Those were our superheroes. But for me, you know, my country club wasn't the rugby club, it was KFC. And so hip-hop, when I seen black men, black women spit rhymes over music, over melodies, that resonated to me, you know. But more than the melody and the hook, it was the stories that these men were talking about. They were talking about their trauma and their pain, and that resonated for a kid like me who grew up in violence, who witnessed the same things, you know. And so I always loved the fashion element of hip hop. And so, you know, most boys, we try and cut my brother's hair, cut my cousin's hair. And that's where barbering really started for me, was with my siblings.
Far out. And you started in a tin shed, eh?
Started in a little garden tin shed in a little place called Aranui on the east side of Christchurch, which we call the Hood. But so many beautiful people have come from there, you know. So many beautiful people are in there still helping our communities. And it was in this it was in this garden tin shed where I met, understood vulnerability. Were men who were sitting in my chair who didn't look like me, who didn't talk like me, men wearing suits, to men wearing game patches, share their stories, being vulnerable with me. And it was there where I soon learnt very fast that we are more alike than we are different. That it didn't matter what background you came from, what ethnicity you were, how rich you were or how poor you were. Pain and shame did not discriminate.
That reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend just on the weekend, bro. Because being in the podcast space and being able to connect with so many different people, he asked me, like, how do I feel or what do I learn? And I'm like, bro, the more that I have conversations with people, the more that I realize how normal people are. You know, because perception, oh, he's a superstar. Oh, he's a gang member. Oh, this and that. But really, when you have a human connection, you connect on a level where, holy, how I think, how you think, how I feel, how you feel. Even though our experiences shape those emotions differently, that's what we connect to, eh?
Yeah.
And how did that progress, bro, into actually getting like a proper shop? Like,
man, so it was, I mean, I became well known for hair art. I did portraits of my favorite artists on people's heads. And so I did a portrait of Tupac, which I uploaded onto Facebook at the time. This is over 10 years ago. And when I woke up the next morning, it had over 1 million likes and shares. Bro, I thought I was that man. And so
one night.
And so that really catapulted my social media. And so, because there weren't many barbers putting it up there, there's only a certain few that I follow. Lance the barber from Brisbane, and Alan, who owned New Flavour Barbers in South Auckland, up in Papatoetoe. So only a few barbers were putting hair out there. And so it was from then people were just messaging in like, how do we learn this? How can you teach us? And so Wifey had an idea of putting together a tutorial. And so we put it up online, promoted it, and in 10 minutes, we did the New Zealand tour, and in 10 minutes it sold out. Hairdressers were just wanting to learn how to barber. And it was in this tutorial where I got to share my story. And I would always, talk about being vulnerable, talk about, experiencing sexual violence, family violence, but then coming out the other end. And I always tell hairdressers, we're like the mini Oprahs of the world. We may not be on TV, but we hold space for the people who sit in our chairs. And so it's such an honor and privilege to be in this career, to have this career. And I was like, oh, fuck, people actually want to listen to my story. Because people were relating to the things that I was talking about, because it was very, very tapu. We don't talk about this stuff, especially as a Pasifika man. A lot of the stuff we should sweep under the carpet or hide it in the closet. But no, I refused to stay silent about it. Because of my experience. And so Wifey then was like, oh, should we do an Australian tour? And I was like, man, no one in Australia is going to want to come listen to me talk about barbering. But anyways, we did put myself out there, and within that one we did 9 cities, we did 20-something shows, 22 shows, and we sold out in one day. And so that raised the money to have the barber shop, our flagship shop that we have now in Christchurch. But coming from the hood, all my boys who got into dealing drugs and the game, they respected it because I was doing something legit. I hustled and worked hard to have what I have now. I didn't have to sell drugs to get my shop. Like, I worked for it.
That's powerful, bro. And that's a good way of, I guess, being an example. And a word that I heard you and your wife share a lot about tonight was modeling. You guys model what a healthy relationship look like, but you're modeling in other areas as well. Being a good father, business owner, all of those things. Was this conscious? Yes, because I wanted different. Because all my boys were, ending up in jail or in the game, or I've lost 4 friends to suicide. And so that, I didn't want to follow that path. I wanted something better for myself. And it was hard. It's been hard, It's not easy. Healing, doing the work, whatever you want to call it. But I wanted to be better because I knew what the other way was,
where I was going to end up. So that was conscious, a decision to want to be better. And so that required me to reach out and ask for help. And so I just surrounded myself with men who were doing the work, men who were successful in business, and just ask questions,
Wow.
And it's quite hard for a lot of guys who find disappointment very uncomfortable, being turned or being rejected. That was hard for me. But I've learned that there's no easy way around vulnerability. You can't make vulnerability easier. It's hard. It takes courage to be vulnerable. And the only way to get around it is to go through it. And so it's always hard, being vulnerable, sharing my story or talking.
Is there layers to vulnerability, bro?
Good question. I've never been asked that question. I don't think so. I think if you're vulnerable, you're vulnerable.
Because the way that I think about it, there's things that used to be hard for me to talk about, but now I can talk about them openly. And so there's still vulnerability, but I guess what I felt initially, that sort of rubbed off. But there's other areas of my life where, that's vulnerability. So in my mind, it feels like it could be the same level, but perhaps my relationship to what I'm speaking about is different.
Yeah, it gets easier, I think, especially if you're sharing the same thing. I remember the first time I shared my story at high school in my 3-minute speech, I cried. Talking about mum getting a hiding. Now when I talk about it, I don't cry. It does get easier, but there is other things that I find hard to talk about. But I'll still dive in there and get vulnerable. But and because our men need to see this, I have to model what vulnerability looks like. And it's not easy. And
it's not.
Yeah. And you get pushback. People like, oh, that's not the barbershop I want to go to.
And perhaps it's just not for them at this point in time, eh?
Exactly.
You're right, bro. The work. How do you even describe the work?
Man, the work looks like different things to different people. For me, it would be becoming the best version of myself. What can I do to be a better dad? What can I do to be a better husband, better partner, a better friend? And so whatever that work looks like, whatever is required for me to get to that place of being the best version of me, that's what the work is. So whether it's sitting in therapy or going for a hikoi up the mountain or, going to the gym, I'm still working on that. That's what the work is. It's doing what is best, that will best serve my life and my kids.
Even if that means being uncomfortable, eh? Almost especially, eh? That's just a part of it. It's a requirement. Because when I think about the work, it's inspiring. It's hard, but I'm aware of what's on the other side. And that's where I get my courage from, is when I think about how good it would be to be free of this, or to be honest, or to be authentic. And if that means it's going to help me be my best, that's what gives me my courage to step into that vulnerability or to step into the work. And it's just having that kind of understanding or foresight before entering into that space. But then the other thing that I think about is that it's constant. Just when you get through one valley,
something else comes.
So for you, how do you process that?
I talk a lot to my wife, but they're not just my wife, because it's not all on my wife, I believe. I have my people in my corner. I have a few good men that I can always reach out to and talk to. I spend time with my children. My children are grounding for me. Just to see their faces, when I get home from work and they all rush to the door trying to fight over who's going to get the first hug with dad, that's healing, because I don't ever have a memory or feeling that way towards my own father, and so to see my children live a completely different life than what I lived, that's grounding for me. So that's me, the work is working, doing the work is working. I've changed the narrative. So yeah, I always try and encourage that, it's possible. to be everything that you never received. You know, I'm living proof that a boy who lived the first 15 years of my life in violence and abuse can dream of being something else and then actually be something else, you know. And so it's just, yeah, in all our mahi and all the work that I try and do, I try and model, show our tāne a different window to life, you know, because if they've only ever been staring out one window, you know, we have to show them that there is another way.
It's pretty next level, bro. You got me all emotional. It's very real, bro. Just being able to, I guess, hear your story and the real depth of what it is that you've had to endure. And something that really came out to me was, it's not our fault that we go through trauma, but it's our responsibility to heal it. And you've taken that responsibility head on. And with that responsibility, you've been able to change a whole new narrative and story for your life, because there's many examples of people who have grown up the same, who don't take that responsibility, and their reality just becomes a rinse and repeat of what they've gone through. And that's just incredible, bro, that you've been able to do that, you know, for yourself first and foremost, but for your children. That's breaking changes, bro, and breaking chains, sorry, and that's what got me all emotional. So it's beautiful, bro.
Thank you also. Well, we have to, you know, because my story is not unique, you know, it's a lot of my boys' stories, it's a lot of our whānau stories. And in fact, you know, our children are still experiencing this in our backyard, you know, in our homes right now. There's still, in Aotearoa, every 3 minutes there's a phone call to the police. That's only the people who are ringing, you know. And I know for majority of my mum's hidings and abuse, she never rang the cops, you know, because cops just got tired of coming over to our house, you know. So how much more violence is happening in our backyards that we all choose to turn a blind eye to, you know. And so I refuse to stay silent. I refuse to be quiet about this topic, because it's affecting all of us. You know, it's affecting our children, and our children are our future.
Bang, they are. And I think it's even more so because I'm a papa myself now, and that really just hits home when you're in that space and you're a papa and you've now carried this responsibility. And for me, as soon as I stepped into papahood, the responsibility that I took is that I'm going to do the work so it doesn't get passed down, similar to you. And the question that I can't wait to ask my son is, how do you want to be loved? Because I can give him all of the love, but he might just want it differently. And just having that kind of conversation is what I know could have been helpful for me. But it didn't take away the love that I did receive from my papa, but just being able to have, again, doing the work, being able to look at why you are the way that you are, the decisions that you've made, your behavioral patterns, your thinking patterns stem from somewhere. And when you can go back further, you can see all of these different experiences, how you were parented, and what would have made things better. And for me, just learning from that, this might shape his reality in a different way and might make me be a better papa. So these are the things that I think about, and these are the things as the reason why I'm so inspired by your story.
That's beautiful, bro. Thank you.
Bro, this is fucking on.
But I mean, for me, my children are my greatest invitation to do the work. You know, when my son was born, you know, this thing that all it did was cry and shit, but yeah, I loved it so much. You know, I fell in love. It was love at first sight. You know, love at first sight is when you have a child. I just thought, who would ever want to hurt something so precious and so innocent? And so I knew if I wanted to be everything that this kid that I never received for this kid, I had to do the work. And what did the work look like? It looked like, asking some hard questions to myself, asking hard questions to people, even if I was going to face disappointment or rejection. My son was my reason why I had to do the work.
Wow. And you knew it already though, eh? But that was just your confirmation that, hey, jump in.
Dive in, bro.
Yeah, dive in. And a big part of your story, and still is to this day, and something that you spoke into tonight, is around the sexual abuse. And for Tāne, this isn't something that is spoken about too often or enough. But through your experience, it's something that seems to be coming out a lot from other Tāne. And so, what is it around sexual abuse that's happening to our young Tāne?
There's nothing quite like sexual abuse that will just go to the depths of your soul and strip and steal and destroy everything within you. It twists you. It just does. It's so destructive. My first recollection of sexual abuse was the age of 3. From someone, because my parents had big hearts and they wanted to help everyone. They didn't know a thing called boundaries that I've learned now. So we had an open home policy, which meant anyone could come stay. But then that also exposed us to people who had hidden agendas. And so I was a victim of sexual abuse from men and women right throughout my childhood. And it was hard, it hurt so much. I honestly believed that I had something on my forehead that said rape me, touch me, because it happened so frequently in our house. And so when it came to doing the work in healing, I remember holding my son, putting my son to sleep. I would always put my kids to sleep, but when my son turned 3 and I put him to sleep, I just cried. I cried every night for that whole year because it just triggered, like I always remembered that was the year that my innocence was robbed from me. And so I made a vow to my son, what we call it whiangainga, the covenant. I made a covenant with my son that I will do the work, keep healing and talk about it, because it's running rampant in our communities. We held Baba Wānanga. We were honoured that, MSD approached me and wanted to collab. And so, I was a bit standoffish, government wanting to collab. I was like, I'm going to lose my street cred here. But obviously I met beautiful wahine. I give credit where credit is due. A beautiful lady, auntie, I call her auntie, by the name of Zephyr Christian, who humanized the government for me. That there are people who are working in these systems trying to change shit, but these systems were created long before us, and they no longer serve our people. And so when they came to the table, I said, this is what I want to do. I want to hold wānanga. I want to hold space for barbers, because I'm just one man. There's only so many heads I can cut, but I want to teach other men how to have these conversations, how to hold space for our tāne who sit in our chairs. Because I'm a massive believer, who am I to do this work with the men that sit in my chair if I don't do this work within myself first? Because when you're working with men, bro, you got to be about the work, or else you're going to get sniffed out. Men know when they're talking to someone who's fake. And so my dream was to hold these wānanga. We had 3 wānanga around the country. And so barbers were signing up. 150 barbers from around the motu signed up. And at every wānanga, I share my story, very raw. And then we do an activity called the Circle of Courage. And in one activity, at one of these wānanga, I open up the space and I say, gentlemen, step into the circle if you've ever been disappointed. So Tāne step in, every man stood in the circle. Stay in the circle if you've ever felt heartbroken. All the young guys step away from the circle. And I keep posing the question, keep asking questions. And one of the questions I got to was, step inside the circle if you've ever been sexually abused. And in this one wānanga, 47 men stood in that circle. 47 men with their heads down in full tears. And I said, look up, others. And all you could see was the whole room flooded in tears. Men who you will never ever see on research, you will never see on data, because society does not encourage us Tāne to speak, to feel, to talk. You know, they encourage this, they encourage this. But society never encourages safety for our men. And so, 47 men got to share their story of childhood trauma without even having to speak.
Wow.
It was all in action. And so for me, that wipes out anything out there that says, 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 people get sexually abused, because we just don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't know.
Wow, that's so true, because it's only data that's been collected or that's been shared, whereas how many things aren't being shared.
And I've met them all, bro. I've met Maori, Pacific, white, European men who have all been abused, And so then we wonder, why people perpetrate violence. It's not natural for you to harbour and hold bitterness and this trauma, Our body collects it all. But then there needs to be an output, and the manifestation of that trauma usually manifests through anger, violence, abuse, colourful words. And our most vulnerable, our children and our women, bear the brunt of that. And so what we try and do with our kaupapa is encourage our Tāne. Yes, I know violence happens to men too. I'm also a victim of that. But we can't deny the facts that we're losing our wahine, our women, to men who don't know how to regulate their emotions all the time. In Australia, we lose 1 woman every week to intimate partner violence. And Aotearoa is sitting above that in the OECD world when it comes to family violence.
So there is that need is there, eh? The cries are there. And she is not your rehab, is just one kaupapa that's looking to create or influence a way for Tāne to regulate their emotions or connect to their heart or find the words. And the campaign that you guys have just released, or the exhibition alongside Mr. G, is, if she is not your rehab, who is she? And that's a beautiful question, because it makes them aware of, I guess, some of the experiences or the violence that they can see their wahine as. But if she isn't that, it creates a polar opposite. Well, what do you see her as in terms of in the light or in the space of aroha? And you fellas must have got, 3,000 responses.
We posed that question. We left it up online for 2 weeks, and over 3,000 submissions came from all around the world. From the UK, from the States, from Canada, from the islands, Hawaii, everywhere. And so our mission was to narrow that down to 101 words for Mr. G, for Graham to put on canvas. And so it was beautiful, bro, to read these submissions. We took 20% of the submissions have come from men inside, men incarcerated. 25% of the submissions are indigenous languages, Pasifika, Māori, Hebrew, Jewish. And it's just beautiful, bro, just to read the words of that the men have submitted. And so with that one word that they submitted, they had to also supply 100 words why they chose that word.
Oh.
And so that was beautiful. We had, the most submitted word was home. Home. So a lot of men, a lot of Tāne see their partners as home. She is home. Our oldest submitter is a kaumātua who's been married to his beautiful Irish wife up in Tūrangi for 50 years. His word was imago Dei. Imago Dei, which is Hebrew for the face of God. He views his wife as the face of God. And our youngest submitter was a 16-year-old Tāne, submitted a word for his single mama, and his word was benevolent.
Benevolent.
She is benevolent. So just beautiful, bro. So powerful.
Wow. So much can be said with one word, eh?
Words have power. We honestly underestimate the power of words. You know, for every, I don't have enough fingers, enough toes to list out all the people, the teachers, the coaches who said that I was going to be another statistic, you know. And when you hear that often, you soon will believe it. You know, you soon believe that, oh, I am unworthy, I am worthless, I am all these bad things. So fuck it. Why not just be this person that everyone says who I am, you know?
So this is like proper reconditioning, or it's helping people reprogram the way that they view things, right? View their wahine, view themselves, view their lives ultimately. And it's just changing lives. And I'm sure you've had so many testimonies. And the way that I think about things is when you're not only being spoken to, or I guess you're hearing someone have a kōrero, people can say whatever they want to say, but if they're living it, if they're a proper example of what it is that they're sharing, it has a different impact. It has a completely different impact. And what you and Sarah are doing is really doing that. And I'm sure you fellas are tired being on the road all the time because these kaupapa are so huge. And so what do the two of you do to ensure that you guys are in a good space to keep giving to the relationship, keep giving to your guys' selves? So what does that look like?
Good question, brother. Well, we believe everything starts with us. You know, this kaupapa is fundamentally built on our relationship, you know, and so we have to be good first before we can go out there and talk about this stuff, you know, or else it just doesn't sit right, you know. I can't stand up there and be fake, not knowing that I've been, you know, mean to my wife or haven't listened to her or, you know, spent time with her or invested my energy. And that was something I learned very early in our relationship. You know, I was giving out to so much in my community, especially my barbershop, my business, you know. I was working long hours. I would sometimes cut hair from 6 a.m. to midnight, you know, just servicing men who wanted to cut, men who wanted to talk. And I made myself available. I made myself accessible. Like, whatever you need, bro, whatever time of day, message me. I soon learned that was not sustainable, you know. I was getting burnt out and I was coming home tired, impatient with my whānau, especially my kids. And my wife posed the question, you know, it's nice that you're all these things to these people out here, but it's unfair that we get the leftovers. We get the breadcrumbs of Matt Brown. And that really challenged me they gave me a perspective, oh shucks, I'm doing all the stuff out here with people, serving my community, but I'm not even serving my whānau to the best that they deserve. And so that's when my mind shifted. It starts at home first. You know, there's no point being this person out there if I'm not this at home. And so I always, me and wifey, once a week, every Wednesday is date night. So we invest into our relationship. You know, maybe a drive, going to see a movie or just having dinner, you know, because we're so busy, but we always intentionally put Wednesday aside. That's our date night with each other.
I feel that's a common theme too, like for anyone, or I wouldn't say for anyone, but for a lot of people. Depending on what you do, you give so much to your mahi, you give so much to this, so much to that. But then when you come home, you're not really able to give your best to who it means most to, your partner, your children, because you've used all of your energy elsewhere. And I think it does come back to stepping into their vulnerability and being like, oh, I actually do got to change something here. Because it's so unfair. It really is unfair that other people get the best of you, but yet your partner gets the shitty side of you, where you're grumpy, where you're triggering, where you're seeing them not at their best. And so that was a massive realization, even for myself, to really have that understanding. And so again, that question, what do I need to do? And my biggest work on this year was actually listening to her. And I even gave myself a bit of a leeway where I said I'd probably fail, because if we've been one way or a certain way within a relationship, when you start to say things, I need to be better, and you have all of these solutions, it's going to take time for you to change. And so being able to communicate, this is what I'm hoping to do, or this is what I'm looking to do, but be aware that I might fail, and I just need your support, or try and figure out a way to continue to stay on the path, because you've been a certain way for so long. And for me, being able to have that bit of a cushion, not only did I fail, but I also received so much growth just through listening. Holy hell, she is right. Holy hell, things are better because of this, as opposed to being dominant, as opposed to feeling like I'm thinking about everything. So she's taught me so much this year just through that one intention. And I think when you can get into that space where you can both listen, where you can both receive, where you can both have a voice, I think that's where the beauty of relationship and connection actually fosters.
Yeah. And it's practice, eh? I don't believe in practice makes you perfect, but practice makes you better, because we're always getting better. So yeah, it's freaking hard listening, like sometimes like me and my wife will sit there and like, hey, you got 5 minutes to talk about whatever you want. I'm not allowed to respond, I'm not allowed to reply back, and you just got to listen. Then you got to, after the 5 minutes is done, you then relay that information, to really see if you're listening. Okay, so this is what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah, it's like, because they can say something, but you interpret it totally different, eh? So how you said, it's like responding back, is this what you mean? Because you could be completely in the same book but on different pages. Definitely,
especially if your wounds are rubbing against each other. I'm wounded, she's wounded, and our wounds are not connecting. You can trigger each other, and so I've always been a massive believer. My triggers are my invitation. Triggers are my invitation to, okay, I need to work on that. Why was I triggered? I'll share this example. Like, I always drive home from work, and on this one day, we had one car at the time. Wifey picked me up, drove us home, and these two ways to get to home, these two roads that split up. And I like to time myself, so this going the left way was the fastest way home. My wife chooses to go right. And then this turned into a big argument over nothing. She was like, I just want to go this way. I was like, yeah, but this way's faster. Like, I just want to get home. I'm tired, blah, blah, blah. Turned into this massive argument, which then resulted in me saying, fuck, you just remind me of my mum. Bro, if I knew what's good for me, I will never utter those words ever again. She lost it, and she jumped out of the car. And I sat there angry, like, what the was that? Like, it was all over. It's always over the dumbest. The big arguments are always over the dumb things, eh? And I sat with myself and I asked myself, how did that escalate from her choosing to go the way home that she wanted to go? And I thought to myself, doing the work was me thinking back. I hated what triggered it was she didn't listen. I felt not listened to, which then also meant that I wasn't believed. She didn't see me because I was the kid that was always trying to have a voice in saying things, but I was always shut down. And so when my person refuses to listen that this way is the fastest way home, that triggered me to go, use colourful words. And so I share that because we're always, you're in constant, when you're in a relationship with someone, you're in constant growth, constant triggering mode with each other, and it could be over the silliest things. And that was, and when I think about it, the only time difference was a minute, but it exploded into this massive thing, And so obviously I owned my wrong, apologized and said, I'm so sorry, and explained to my wife, this is what happened, why I made it into a big thing. And she was like, cool, but don't ever say that again. I was like, yeah, my bad.
It's quite interesting, how these surface things are like the signals that, as you said, like the trauma is always there, it's within our bodies, but how those things can spark, I guess, what's deep within us, whether it comes out in a comment or it comes out in, as you say, colourful words or these certain experiences. But sometimes people just carry on, or they just go through and think that, this is just normal, this is just a normal reaction. Whereas, as you say, that's the invitation, to be like, oh, where did this come from? And then it's also the invitation to apologize or to be able to respond and not necessarily be trapped within all of those emotions. So that's awesome to be, because I've had experiences like that too, bro, where I've just popped off and I've said something and I'm like, where the hell did that come from? And so it's quite an interesting process to be able to actually sit and try to unpack. And it's always a beautiful thing. I also feel that because within every relationship, there's no relationship that's absolutely perfect without any disagreements. But I think the cool thing that I know that myself and Hinepani are very good at, and I pride ourselves on this, is that when something does happen, it doesn't take long for us to be able to settle down and come back and actually have a conversation where we're both heard, where we hear one another, we're listening, and we better understand, and things get resolved through that process. And it's quite a healing, and it also provides a moment of deep connection because we know one another's hurt. And at the end of the day, we love one another, and we don't want the hurt to take us away from what's actually there. And so being able to have that vulnerability, whether you've popped off, but being able to come back and just actually connect back to the love, that's where you have that connection. That's where you have that vulnerability. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about too, bro, before we close off is the bro Kenyan. He's a good fella, bro. I met that fella one time. I've met him twice now. But I know he's a big part of your space. And I met him one time at a Grant Cardone seminar. And we're in this setting, and it was about asking Grant Cardone some questions. And he asked the question, I asked the question, and then based on his question, I was like, man, that's a fella that I really want to meet. And I was standing in line waiting to get my photo, and he walked past me. And I told the bros, I was like, I want to go meet that fella. Turned around and I was like, oh, hey bro, just wanted to introduce myself, told him my name, and I just asked him a question. And the thing that he said to me is that it's your duty. That's exactly what he said to me, and I held on to it. And I was like, fine, I didn't get his name, or he said his name, but I just didn't hear it because I was like in my moment. And not long after, I was scrolling on Instagram, and then I just seen him. I was like, holy hell, this is that fella. And then ended up having a catch up with him, but just the small interactions that I've had with him, the genuineness in his heart, just the kind of presence he has, I was like, man, that's a cool fella. And so when I'm seeing him with you and you guys doing a lot of things together, I'm like, it's just joyful, bro. It's super choice. So how did that connection come about?
Well, in fact, his wife, bro, she is such a strong, beautiful philanthropist at heart, just a heart of service. His wife, Charlotte, she was childhood friends with my wife. And so that's how that connection came. And we were obviously, running our barbershop, our kaupapa. Every Christmas, our barbershop's always done raise funds for our most vulnerable, our children. And how I do this is I connect with the schools, because our schools know our kids the best. They were with them, and I ask the schools what they need. And so the teachers, bring back list of names of whānau who are in need that Christmas. And then we go out and buy exactly what that kid needs, and then we get a Santa, someone to dress up as Santa, anonymous, and they just go drop the presents off. No strings attached, no one knows it's from us. We were running it for years, and Charlotte reached out to my wife and got back into connected with my wife again, because she wanted to do similar stuff in South Auckland schools. And so their business is in South Auckland, and so they have this need and duty to give back to South Auckland, to the community that's that's gifted and served them. And so that's how that relationship really came to be again. And so we've just connected, and they're close friends of ours. Love and adore them. Kenyan is a giant. How do I even? He is someone who is a big dreamer, And so him and my wife, honestly, when you get them in the room together, I'm like, guys, it's bedtime. 3 a.m., 5 a.m. chats.
Still going,
because he's just a dreamer, and he's like, honestly, that man has the solutions, has the strategy. Him and his wife have the strategy to erase homelessness in New Zealand if the government would listen. If our government would listen to property people. Yes, they'll get rich, but what we currently have is not working. Our children are homeless. Our children are sleeping in cars. Whānaus are being put up in random places, and so those guys are a taonga.
Man, that's beautiful, bro. That's awesome to hear that. And I'm sure you've been able to connect with so many amazing people throughout your journey. And I think the cool thing about that is when you're in service, not only do you get to meet people, but you actually get to build these meaningful connections. And in occasions, you actually get to see where they've been able to transform and not transmute their trauma, which is so beautiful, bro. So just going to pass it over to you, bro. If there's any last words that you want to share with our Planting Seeds whānau, just going to hand it over.
Thanks, Horse. I said it before, it's possible to change the narrative. Your childhood trauma wasn't your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. And what you do not transform, you will transmit. So heal for your whānau, heal for the future generations, because I'm a massive believer that, the seeds that I plant today, that we plant today, we may never witness or eat the fruit from the trees, but I believe our children's children will one day. And I believe for a violence-free Aotearoa, that's my dream. I don't want to be doing this job. I don't want to be talking about this stuff. I believe and hope for a country that leads the way, because Aotearoa has always been leaders in the activism world. But I really believe and hope for a violence-free Aotearoa.
Wow, beautiful, bro. Thank you so much, Matt, for gracing us with your kōrero, with your presence, and just with your kaupapa. As I said, it's super inspiring. It's a huge maunga that you're on, and I guess that ambition or that dream for violence-free Aotearoa is something that's going to continue to be flowing as long as you're kaupapa and as long as you're walking around, bro. So keep using your voice, keep using your kahui, I guess the people who are around you as your support, because as I said, it is a maunga, and as long as you've got that support, as long as you've got that dream, and as long as there are people around you who are also championing the same message, it's going to continue to go in the way that it's going, bro. So mihana kia koe. I'm so grateful to have this connection. This has been a This has been a This has been a meaningful chat, bro, and I'm just so thankful, bro, that you've given the time tonight. And all my love to you, to Sarah, and to your guys, kaupapa and children.
Thank you so much, Maus. Whakatei lava, Maus.